I think that next time around it'll be the day after the election. Right? So this is now October, and we're going to have an election. So I want to give people an idea what they should have in mind. And if they want to become active, I want them to have a good strategy to try to change things. Okay?
Good. Change.
Can I?
Real
let
change.
Me just start off now. Or save civilization. That's another way to put it, because it's not just do you want change or don't you, right? You better save civilization.
Yeah.
Now, here's the idea. There are two pieces of evidence that you have to bear in mind, but even before that, some considerations of method. I start from the idea that we need to perpetuate divided government. We do not want to put all power into the hands of either party, and especially not the Republicans. If the Republicans take all power, two houses and the presidency, then they will proceed to institute what would amount to a kind of fascist dictatorship for the 21st century. It would be a permanent austerity dictatorship using their control of the Supreme Court, since they have that too. Democrats don't. With the Supreme Court, they could proceed to destroy all labor unions and severely limit the right to vote, the franchise.
Yeah, well, couldn't Barkey make a couple of appointments to the court in his last 2 years?
It's a possibility. But we have to go based on, and what we have to deal with is actually much more urgent than that. So anyway, you obviously don't want to have the Republicans in control of House, Senate, and Supreme Court against one weak executive for the next 2 years. Obama obviously being, incapable of fighting under most circumstances so far. We don't want to court such a situation. So therefore, we want to make sure that the Senate remains not in the hands of the Republicans. And on why in particular that is so from a domestic point of view, we have this very dramatic tape from Mitch McConnell, which was a meeting where he was presenting his devotion to the infamous David Koch, the reactionary billionaire, the guy who thinks that Kansas is his dukedom. So David Koch was sitting there, and some people asked Mitch McConnell of the Republicans, what would you do if you ever got the control of the Senate? And he said, well, if you have the House and 51 votes in the Senate, you can do virtually anything, because you can get all manner of fascist genocide passed in the House, and then you work on that in a conference committee, and when that budget reconciliation comes back to the Senate, they only need 51 votes. So even if the Republicans did not have a filibuster-proof majority, they would be able to do whatever they wanted. So how would you like a country with no food stamps, no minimum wage, no Head Start, no WIC, no nothing? All of that is absolutely within reach, given the Austrian school creed of these lunatics. Okay, so this is worth avoiding. And then we have the other problem, which is the foreign policy side of it, right? A couple of examples, right? The most recent, the principal foreign policy advisor to Romney in 2012 was a guy called Robert Kagan. And Robert Kagan was on CBS Face the Nation 10 days ago, that Sunday, saying that if he had been in power, in other words, if Romney had been sitting there and the neocon Kagan had been able to make these decisions, the entire Syrian Air Force would have been bombed, all the runways would have been pockmarked, and Assad would have been brought to his knees. And, of course, this would mean then that whatever terrorists were on the scene would be the beneficiary. So these people have learned absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
But the most urgent is this question of McCain. If you have two things in your mind when you go to vote, think of that McConnell tape where McConnell says, we will make sure that there's no increase in the minimum wage, or no minimum wage could very well be, and we will not do anything to help people that are crushed by student debt, right? 1.3 trillion of student debt. But on the foreign policy scale, this is where it's even scarier. On my website, tarpley.net, please go there. You'll find it repeated several times. Or on my Twitter, Webster G. Tarpley, there are pictures of Senator John McCain, going to Syria. And this is Idlib, Syria, rebel-controlled, terrorist-controlled area. It's April 2013, a year and a half ago almost, and he's sitting down with a group of crazies, right, a group of terrorists. Some of them call themselves Free Syrian Army. There is General Idris, Salim Idris was the head of the Free Syrian Army. He is sitting there with Senator McCain, but of course in the meantime, General Idris has fled. He fled to Doha in Qatar, and his number two man fled to Stockholm, Sweden. He got about as far away as he could. But the principal news is that McCain is also sitting down with two people who were kidnappers. They were widely known to be the kidnappers of a group of Shiite Muslim religious pilgrims who were trying to visit a holy site, and these guys kidnapped them. But the most dramatic is that McCain is sitting there with a guy called Badri, Ibrahim Badri. And when he sat down with him already, Badri was known in the jihad world as Baghdadi. And this Baghdadi was already known to be a member of Al-Qaeda. He had a price on his head from the U.S. of almost $10 million or up to $10 million U.S. dollars. And he was the head of ISIS. He was the head of the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, right? Sham, Levant, right? ISIS, ISIL, Daesh, whatever you're going to call it. And this is the same person who has now been elevated to the highest position any human being could have in their belief system, other than the Prophet Muhammad himself.
Indeed.
And that is to be the Caliph of the Caliphate.
Right.
This Caliphate, or worldwide Muslim empire, compulsory for all, is now headed by Caliph Ibrahim. So the same Ibrahim, Badri, Baghdadi, Caliph Ibrahim. That's the guy that dear John McCain.
Does McCain does he pretend like he doesn't know back then who this guy is? How does he?
Interestingly enough, we have to note that this was brought up on the floor of the Senate and in interviews by Rand Paul, at least that week. I don't know what he's done with it since, but the week before, Rand Paul was in favor of doing nothing, and then he thought it was important to do something, but he also had to differentiate himself from the rest of the somethings. So he brought up this thing about how he wanted to attack McCain. Now, Rand, I think, unwisely grants that McCain didn't know who he was meeting. I think that's ridiculous. I think he knew exactly who he was meeting. He was meeting the top terrorist leaders of Syria, the people that NATO had been backing. Remember,
the so-called
those guys were
moderate.
all in Libya.
They're so-called
the moderate terrorists, right?
The moderate terrorists.
Jihadis.
Like you got good terrorists and bad terrorists,
No, you don't. What you have is you have a bunch of people who have different costumes and different hats.
I'm joking.
And when they meet the Saudis, they have one costume. When they meet the Chechens, they have a rather more radical one.
Is a terrorist, of course.
And then when they meet the U.S. or the European Union, they have to be respectable. So that's what they do. They put on their Free Syrian Army suit. But then when they present themselves to the world at large, it's the Caliphate. So
how much did Obama just give to the How much did he? Obama just gave a bunch of money to the moderate terrorists to train them.
Wait. Listen, Jeff. I think this is the wrong way to look at it.
Did he not just give some money to them?
No, the Congress voted it, and the money has not been given because the law is written with these provisos in it that you have to prove various degrees of purity. And the word from the people carrying out the stuff is that they're not sure they can find anybody of these terrorists in Syria who can look at it that way.
It's the whole thing is like Keystone Cops to me.
Obama. I think you got to.
No. Well,
got to take.
You and I started. Remember, you and I started out many years ago.
But the world has changed. Obama has been outdistanced in evil. Obama is left in the dust. Look, they don't even tell Obama when somebody tries to kill him. They don't tell him anything. He's a puppet.
That's a very funny line, too. That's very funny. Yes.
They don't even tell him when there's an assassination attempt. They don't even wake him up.
Well, they had somebody in an elevator with him with a gun.
Sleepwalking through history. But I'd like to get to that, too.
That's great.
Let me just proceed my own way.
Yeah.
So the idea is the genocidal austerity talked about by McCain and by McConnell. And then on the foreign policy side, the leader of the Republican Party overall is probably McCain. He's the last still active presidential candidate. At least it still appears so. Mm-hmm. And then he's got his amigo there, Lindsey Graham, and they're calling for a wider war in Syria. They're calling for a wider war in Ukraine. They may be calling for warlike measures on Hong Kong. They may say send the 101st Airborne Division to Hong Kong. These people are lunatics. They're absolutely nuts. And compared to them, Obama is a day at the beach. Okay, so whatever Obama was, he's been ground down. He's essentially on the defensive. I would not regard Obama by any stretch of the imagination as the principal threat. 5 years ago, yeah. 6 years ago, fine. But this is a different world now. So I would say to people, it's important to make sure that those fascist Republicans don't get control of the Senate. And I challenge people, think about it. Think about what I'm telling you.
Well, we should look at the House briefly. They have it now, but they're really looking to build what would be, I guess, an historic majority in the House. Something like we haven't seen in 60, 70 years.
No, I don't think they have any hope of that. You got to remember their
have
majority
hope,
right now is
but is there any realistic
20
hope?
to 25 seats right now.
Yeah.
This is paper thin by historical standards. For most of the time between 1948 and 1994, the Democratic majority was much greater. Right? It was 100 or more. Right? This is nothing historical.
Well, they're looking. They call it a drive to 245. They want 245 seats, which is a net gain of 11.
Yeah, well, that's fine, and that would be significant. But that's not as lopsided as it has been the other way. So I would say you got to remember the Republican Party is a dying social formation. It is moribund, and the only thing that keeps it going now is the media support, which had been all in favor of Obama, has now flipped. And this is an important principle. The U.S. ruling class of Wall Street parasitical oligarchs controls the presidency in the first term by the president's need to get money to get a second term. Mm-hmm. But then when you get into the second term, that is when the scandals begin. And the scandals, the so-called jinx, the scandals are the means used by the oligarchs to control the president in the second term. And that's what's happening to Obama. He's going through the ringer. But the big plus that Obama offers is that he is less of a warmonger than McCain or Graham or Petraeus or Keane or any number of other compared to the neocons, right?
Certainly
the neocons are foaming at the mouth against Obama. That anybody can see that. Robert Kagan, William Kristol, Frederick Kagan, they're all foaming at the mouth, right?
Even the Pentagon brass are very upset.
They're very upset because they are warmongers. They're incurable, incorrigible warmongers. And Obama says, no, that's bad for Obama. We'll take Obama under these circumstances. Or better yet, we'll take divided government, right? Because that's the ultimate choice. So let me get further into this.
Sure.
I would suggest as a slogan for these elections, something that I've been putting out now for the past 10 days or so. It is hashtag, right? Or, as some people would say, sharp mark, right? Diesis. Mm-hmm. Anyway, hashtag arrest McCain for the number 4 ISIS. Arrest McCain for ISIS. Because here we have somebody who has cavorted, consorted, fraternized with the worst terror. I mean, the Caliph, who is ordering people's heads chopped off, is on a first-name basis with McCain. He's met him.
Yeah.
And he talks about it. He says to Kerry in the hearings, he says, John, you don't know them the way I know them. I know so many of them, John. They'll never do what you want, right? They'll never attack ISIS and forget about Assad, right? And so McCain appears as the lawyer, practically as the representative. He's the ambassador from ISIS, right? He could, I wonder, can you be the senator from Arizona and at the same time the ambassador from the Islamic Caliphate of ISIS, bringing the news of the latest beheading?